I have just started recording. My name is Dan Cerulli. You may have seen me at these before. I'm a product manager. I work at Google. Sit on Istio steering committee, and I am. We didn't have a plan for running this meeting, so I am stepping in here at the last minute. I will share my screen in just a second. And let me do that. But because we don't have a pre-planned agenda, I don't see anything that anyone put on the agenda. We will have just kind of open conversation today. The planning for Istio 1.7 is well underway. And maybe I'll put Shweta Singh on the spot and have her talk a little bit about that planning process. But before we do that, welcome to everybody who is here. If you are here for the first time, especially welcome. One thing I did want to draw attention to was a video I saw, maybe it was in the last 2 weeks. It's possible it was a little before that, but I didn't see any references to it down here. The wonderful Megan O'Keefe, Ask Meegs on Twitter, made an Istio in 5 minutes video that if you're unclear on exactly what this is, or you have coworkers, people that you'd like to explain Istio well, this is a really, really good primer on what Istio is, how it works. I highly encourage everybody to check that out. These meeting notes are, the agenda is attached to the calendar invitation. This is the one that I'm displaying. Yes, feel free to check that out. It's a great video. Megan is the person who often does feature walkthroughs of Istio. Most Istio releases, she will do a 5, 10, 15-minute video where she just walks through the new features, which are invaluable. This is just a primer. What is Istio? What do you use it for? So really good if you're just new to the service mesh space, or just kind of understanding what Istio is all about. It's great. So feel free to share that. Yes, as I said, I was thinking maybe I would put Shweta on the spot. Shweta Singh has joined Google relatively recently, and we're lucky enough to have her not only working on our commercial stuff, but she's really, really involved in open source. And before I put you on the spot, Shweta, to talk a little bit about the 1.7 planning, I would like to talk about the fact that people think a lot about contributions to open source in terms of developers. And we have a lot of developers who work in open source. A lot of the stuff that's in GitHub, of course, is written in Go. It's written in C. It is code. However, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in an open source project that is not just writing code. For example, we've got a lot of stuff up there that's written in Markdown. And some of that stuff is written by developers, but a lot of it is written by other people as well. So we have writers who work on Istio. There are marketers from several companies who work on Istio. We have some product management involved, although clearly not enough. Shweta is a TPM, and at Google, the role of the TPM is to help ensure that we deliver the things we're trying to deliver. And it's something that is invaluable in actually, understanding and communicating what you're going to deliver. And so Shweta has joined recently, and I think 1.7 is the first release where we're really going to feel her the positive effect of having the coordination. So Shweta, would you like to talk to the group a little bit about what we're doing differently for the 1.7 release? Sorry for putting you on the spot like this. Feel free to pretend you have network difficulties if you don't want me to put you on the spot. But would you like to talk a little bit about how things are going to be different and the positive effects we'll see?
Absolutely. So just a small correction. I joined in the middle of Istio 1.5.
Okay.
So help support that, and then Istio 1.6. When I joined, obviously from that to the current Istio 1.7, as far as I understand, there has been lots of improvement in terms of how the planning will happen, how do we actually present it to the TOC. So I don't know if you're aware, there is a technical oversight committee meetings, which happens every Friday. If you haven't joined them, I highly encourage, just because that's where most of the strategical decisions based on what feature sets are going, if the designs are approved, most of the talking aspects of it, the release aspects of it, the blockers and prioritization is actually being discussed. So again, if you haven't, I highly encourage on Fridays, it's 10 to 11 is the meeting. As Dan was talking about the management, so we have a couple of folks in the TOC meetings from IBM, Red Hat, and Google and other companies who actually takes off that management role and help us drive these strategical decisions. With this TO 1.7, one good part which we have done is, and even with 1.6 is, right, every working group, they actually present what they're planning as a delivery with the prioritization done, contributor added to those, the release type, whether it should be alpha, beta, or GA, there are various aspects of deciding what the release type should be. Those are being presented. Now, mostly it gets approved, but if there are questions as to whether or not this can be done, or there are some implementation aspects of it, we normally discuss that and may get a little deprioritized. What also happened with this TO 1.6 was we did do the retrospective, and it was actually very helpful. It did surface some of the areas where we can improve. As you know, in any software industry, there is a room for improvement. The one which actually surfaced very high in most of the working groups was the documentation and improvement on the testing, which we are taking very seriously. And for Istio 1.7, as Dan was talking about the improvements, so one of the improvements is automating most of the documentation. So we spend less time on the testing. We used to have, I don't know if any of you have joined the community testing days, which happens 2 to 3 weeks before the release. And that is really big process of having multiple engineers sitting in a room for quite a long time, for 4 to 6 hours to do the testing. So automating that is very helpful for us, so that either some of them, which is not get automated, can be done asynchronously, or if the automation is done, it's just a matter of pressing a button and looking at the results. So our Istio 1.7 is slated to release on 11th August. I highly encourage, if you can help being a contributor to the open source, help us with testing. The testing days right now are planned for 29th July and 4th of August. So if you have any questions, what needs to get tested, where you can help contribute, please reach out to me or any of the working group leads. We do have a charter where we do define what needs to be tested, and that will be very helpful also as a contributor to the open source for us. So yeah, any other questions?
Thank you, Shweta, for giving that overview. It has really been nice to have such active participation from a TPM, and I think that the effect is really from the project. It's very much helping us. Yes, I do have a question. When is the 1.8 planning going to happen?
Excellent question. So normally what happens is, before the release, so the current release is 1.7, I tend to start approximately 3 to 4 weeks before the release. So in that aspect, it should be somewhere mid of July. That's when I start working with all the working groups and get the dates out. One more thing, if people have not seen the newsletter, all those actually goes in the newsletter as well. I do publish the newsletter in discuss.io website as well, and pin it for a week. So all the dates are there as well. If you are interested, please follow that newsletter. It has all the information.
My poor little Chromebook is struggling to keep up. I hope you can understand me.
No worries.
Okay, great. Thank you for the moment on the site discussion. Yes, very, very useful. Any other questions for Shweta before I just open the floor? Okay, great. Well, let's open the floor. Christian, I saw you had a release recently.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, well, I just came on to just see how things are going here in the community. But yeah, we announced a couple of things I think would be interesting for this group. The developer portal for Istio, which is a product that allows you to kind of treat the Istio Ingress Gateway as a lightweight API gateway with the ability to expose APIs through a customizable portal. It comes with things like a rate limiting server, an external auth server, and ability to document your APIs, expose them to users, and have them self-serve and sign up for API keys and that kind of thing. So that was one thing. And then we also released a new version of Glue yesterday, 1.4, with support for Istio 1.6. So if you need a full-blown API gateway, we built Glue on top of Envoy proxy that also has a developer portal, but then ties in nicely with Istio's SDS and MTLS capabilities.
Cool. Okay. As I said, we didn't we on the steering committee usually pass the baton for running these, and this week we forgot to do that, so no one was holding it. There was no pre-planned agenda. So usually we have a little bit of a pre-planned agenda. We might go through a few points and then we open up the floor. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like answered about Istio, anything specific, sometimes we have people on the call who can answer it. Sometimes we need to bring in the right people from working groups. But I will just open the floor now and see if anyone has anything they'd like to ask about or discuss about. And if there aren't any, then we can all get back to work.
Hey, Dan. This is Lee. Well, one, I guess you just a little disappointed you didn't open up the call today with a trombone and a song and dance.
It's not far away. My guitar's right here. The trombone's not quite in reach right now.
Two items that I think may be of interest to, well, hopefully to, excuse me, hopefully to everyone on the call. One is that there's, so one of the hats that I wear is as the chair for the CNCF's network SIG, and we recently formed a service mesh performance working group. In there, there's a few objectives within that group that I'll provide a link to so that folks might check it out if interested. This might be, we've had some early participation from the Istio performance working group sort of while that was still a working group. So just a general call for participation there if people are interested. We're hopeful to help empower those that are adopting Istio to, well, better understand and manage the quote unquote overhead of a mesh, but do it in context of the value that's being provided by the mesh, and sort of help people recognize all of the value, all of the things that the mesh is doing, and then weigh that against any additional latency or memory overhead or CPU or something, you know. It's just,
and are you looking for that's pretty cool. Are you looking for a standard framework? Because I think that would be a pretty positive development that let people kind of do apple to apple comparisons against various service mesh.
Yeah. Yes to both. The apple to apple is sort of an indirect outcome. More of the focus is a standard by which a standard by which people can measure in an ongoing way the performance of their particular deployment, but then also
Gotcha.
to others that have a similar style deployment. Because in some respects, you know, just whether it's kind of like your internet bandwidth at home, that you might think, you know, 5 megs up and 2 megs down, or whatever the thing is like, is quite good. And you're on a particular provider, and then you go and get your bandwidth speed tested, and it turns out you're getting ripped off. Your neighbor is on the same, you know, or whatever. It turns out comparatively, there's actually room for improvement. And so,
Right. So this isn't much generic. You're going to publish results for Service Mesh A, Service Mesh B, Service Mesh C, as much as you're going to tell people, here's something you can do to test how yours is doing.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, I like that.
So
Very
part of
cool.
our focus in the past had been, sort of a one-shot comparative analysis of, you know, across meshes, and that's still a capability. Part of what we're looking to achieve in this working group is essentially a specification called the Service Mesh Performance Specification, or SMPS, that, in a agnostic fashion is intended to characterize the configuration of the mesh, configuration of your workload, and of your performance test, to sort of capture all of those variables into a common format, and then let people can measure their environment, tune their environment, and hopefully squeeze as much out of a mesh as they can, out of Istio as they can. So anyway, so there's a couple of other initiatives actually within that working group, but that specification is one of them. The link that I popped into the chat, it has a deck that I won't hog the time here, but let people kind of look through it. And this second thing that I don't know that I've noted anywhere else, so I'll note it here, and I'll grab a quick link as well. Is technically I'm authoring two books at the moment on Service Mesh, and how I'm still standing, or I can imagine right now Christian Post is sort of shaking his head in disappointment.
Good luck, my man. Good luck.
Yeah, exactly. Just anyway, one of them is Service Mesh patterns, and so it's sort of in the same vein around what we were just talking about performance tuning and getting the most value out of your mesh. That this book, Service Mesh Patterns, is intended to help people get the most out of their mesh in other ways, not in terms of capabilities, or to provide them common examples of different deployment patterns. And so with Istio, there's more than can be covered in a book, which is So I guess
that's cool. I think that we have certainly we have people who are looking at that internally as well. How do you describe? There's Istio, the technology, and our site maybe does a decent job of describing that technology, but those patterns for implementation, both from an architectural perspective, like, hey, I've got 3 clusters in different regions, so what's the best architecture for me to install a service mesh, as well as patterns for adoption. And are you looking at adoption patterns as well as deployment patterns?
Yes, and actually, Dan, some of your work in this area has been I've well noted that work, and I think that it's been well noted and well received. Just kind of the analogy that you've made in the past about the ability to consume or deploy Istio's capabilities a la carte, and do so in a piecemeal fashion, and sort of get one small success after the next small success. That adoption, there will be a couple of adoption patterns. Some of the patterns are intended to be broadly useful across nearly any service mesh that you might choose to deploy. That said, some meshes don't do as much as others, or they have a different architecture, and so that'll be noted in there. I think part of why I'm bringing this up on today's call is because there wasn't anything else to talk about. Two, I hadn't really articulated, I hadn't mentioned this book anywhere else. And I guess three, it certainly occurs to me that there are any number of folks on the call that would hopefully benefit from the book, but potentially there's a number of folks on the call that would maybe have some insights that they'd like to share, or some stories about part of their deployments or their experiences that might influence those patterns or influence the book. So happy to be influenced.
Lee, is there a good place for us to get involved with the CNCF effort to measure performance?
Yeah, there is. Let me pop a link into the chat.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And that was it for me.
Well, cool. I think that's great. I think that anything that helps people along that journey of understanding how to take this technology and apply it to them, again, whether it's a deployment pattern and understanding because it's complex, or importantly those adoption patterns. And what I used to talk about Istio a la carte. I often now refer to it as kind of incremental. I should do a talk on that. Incremental adoption is really important because it helps. I was talking to a customer just today who's really interested in all of Istio and is thinking about it, but really in the end we said, you have a critical need for MTLS. They have some regulatory reasons that they need to put MTLS in. I said, don't start with training all of your developers on all these APIs. Start with MTLS. You'll get your deployment pipeline down. You get the sidecar injection in. Can turn it on essentially silently. They don't have to worry about. And then you can declare a small victory and say, hey, we've done one thing. After you finish that, then you can take on the next one. And so I think that those adoption patterns are really critical for every technology, understanding how you're going to expose the people in the infrastructure in your organization to this technology. So that's great. Glad you're looking at those. Thank you, Lee. And I see Sudeep Batra has put an issue in here about running 2 control planes. Is that what we're looking at here? Sudeep, would you like to talk a little bit about this?
You know what, Dan, Sudeep just messaged me. I think he's out there in the waiting room and doesn't have quite the same virtual knock that I.
Yeah. Thank you. Keep reminding me. I'm a new Zoomer. Okay, Zoomer. Sudeep, welcome. Yes, at some point Zoom introduced, I have to admit people into the meeting, and my apologies if I'm not doing that actively enough. Thanks for the ping. If anyone else keeps an eye on that participant window and sees people in waiting room, please let me know. So I see in the agenda, Sudeep Batra put in an issue which is unable to create 2 control planes using the Istio operator. And Sudeep, are you in the meeting now? Can you hear me? I think I see you, Sudeep. Can you hear? If you are talking, we can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
Hey, yes, we hear you. How are you?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I think there was some problem with my microphone also.
I had that when I joined.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So basically, what I was trying to do is use the Istio operator, and I suppose we call it as the IOPS CR, right? The IOPS CR. That's the Istio Operator CR, which we create. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So, so there are two use cases. Now, I suppose it is possible to use multiple IOP CR to create multiple instances of, let's say, the Ingress gateway. That should be possible, and I see that we have documentation for that also in Istio, like how to create multiple gateway. But my request was to, use this IOP CR to create multiple control plane, entirely two instances of control plane. And this is different from the revisions, for the upgrade, but rather it is like completely two separate instance of the control plane.
Right.
If that is not clear enough.
So,
So, sir,
yeah.
with these,
Go ahead, Brian.
Sudeep, would these two different control planes be serving the same mesh, such as they have a common root of trust and their services can talk to each other securely? Or are we talking about two completely separate meshes living side by side in one cluster?
That is correct. Two completely separate service mesh, side by side.
And I see that Martin Ostrowski has responded and has pushed a PR to allow watching two different namespaces, which is at least part of what you were attempting to do in that CR, or that issue rather. Have you tried using his solution, and what results have you gotten?
Yeah, so what he is saying is by default, this IOP creation is watched inside the Istio system namespace. So his PR is addressing that, like, we can have two or more instance of IOP and they can be in different namespace. I think that's what is being addressed in his PR, which got merged. However, that still does not address, creation of two completely separate instances of the control plane. And then, as you said, like it has to be two different service mesh. In that case, we have to define like which control plane should be able to look into which particular data plane namespace. So we will have to specify that as well.
So you would need to do that. Each control plane would need to live in its own namespace, right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So it sounds like Martin's PR should allow running two completely different control planes in two separate namespaces. I think, if I'm reading this right. Have you been able to pull it down and try it out? Or I know it's just a test
No, I have not tried it. Yeah, I had tried earlier. After this merge, I have not tried. That's right. But I mean, his comment did specify that, it should still not work because the Istio components are by default installed in Istio system namespace. But I can give it a try again. But I think my issue should not be closed because till the time we are able to, completely do two control plane and be able to define, each control plane has a management over a particular data plane namespace. Till that thing is completed, I think we should not close this issue is my humble request.
So, okay, so I think it seems like perhaps it's just a semantics over what maybe he feels you can create two control planes using the operator now, or is it that you can the operator won't allow you to create them, you can run them into different namespaces? It's not clear to me which aspect is not right. The other thing I'm curious about, backing up a little bit, is what the use case is for running two different meshes in the cluster. because my real concern is this a pattern that we do want to recommend? And if we do, then have we as a project thought through all of the implications and everything that will have to happen in order to make sure that happens? Like, will they be upgraded independently? Can you back up a little bit and tell us what that use case is?
Yes, yes, surely, surely.
Okay.
So I'm coming from a telecommunication, background, and here what happens is we have different vendors, and each vendor is coming with its own implementation of the Istio control plane. And for example, it could be like Ericsson and Nokia, right? So there are two different instances of the applications which are provided by two different vendors, and each come with their own implementation of the Istio control plane and the data plane.
And you
So
want to run
yeah,
those but you're running within the same cluster?
exactly. So that I do not have to have the additional overhead of managing the clusters, having additional cluster resource wastage, and also the platform will have additional overhead of managing multiple cluster.
Okay, so you'll take the additional overhead of running essentially separate meshes, separate. And do you expect the entire life cycle to be separate? For example, they'll all be upgraded independently?
That should be managed by the operator, right? The Istio operator, because ultimately it is the IOP, those CR through which each control plane is being created.
Right, but right, I agree. It should be managed by the operator, but they will happen independently. You would like each namespace to be completely autonomous. When you upgrade one, it doesn't have any effect on the other.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So essentially nothing shared whatsoever. Yeah, so I think perhaps the reason that the issue was marked fixed is because it was not clear upon first reading that the desire here is run two separate service meshes, completely separate service meshes within a cluster, with a complete different set of configuration, control plane, data plane, upgrade, lifecycle, etc. And my guess is that as Ostromart marked that complete, he didn't understand from the context of the issue what the full request was. So I think we have a couple things we can do.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think this is the kind of thing that it's a very interesting request. It might be that the TOC wants to weigh in on whether or not we can take on the work necessary to complete that use case. That when we start talking about that, not only are there features that need to be implemented, but there may be an entire suite of tests that need to be created that don't exist. In order to validate, yes, we can completely run two different service meshes with two different life cycles in a cluster. So that might be the kind of thing that we do need to bring to the TOC to get validation and get buy-in, and our lifecycle team, our testing team, a bunch of different teams are going to have to kind of agree, yes, we can take on the work to fully support the use case. It is a really interesting use case. I agree. I don't think yours is necessarily the only industry where we might see it happening, but it is the kind of thing that might take a broader perspective from the project to understand what the implications of saying yes, we'll take that use case on. So this might be a good topic to discuss at, I don't know if anyone else wants to weigh in. Is going straight to TOC to talk about this the right move, or is there another working group or set of working groups that might be appropriate?
Dan, this should probably start in the environments working group. I think we have some degree of support for this today, but it would be good to clarify exactly what we do intend to support today and what we don't. And then if there are remaining decisions after that, then we'd talk to TOC.
Okay, so I know this by heart for sure. But why don't you remind everybody when the environments working group is, when that meeting is?
Let's see, I believe that's on Wednesdays. Yep, Wednesdays at 10 Pacific.
Sudeep, would you be willing to come to a local world to discuss this with them in detail?
Sorry, it broke up a little bit. Can you please say that again, Dan?
I was wondering if you would be willing to come to a lifecycle working group meeting to discuss with them in depth the need so that they can come up with a proposal for how to support this across the project.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, yeah, this is, I really appreciate the time taken, and hopefully now it is clear, and apologies for not being able to articulate it earlier very well. But this is really, you know, like I'm working for Ericsson for AT&T project, and this thing is needed for many vendors, you know, Ericsson, Formed, other vendors who are involved for AT&T environment. So this is like coming as a critical path for us, you know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as Mitch said, the environments working group meets on Wednesday, and I see there is going to be one. Do you know if working group meetings are happening next week, Mitch?
As far as I am aware, they are happening at least until Wednesday. I doubt Thursday and Friday meetings will happen.
Okay, so next Wednesday, July 1st. Yeah, so why don't I will, I'm going to put this on the agenda for that environments working group meeting right now. Let's see if this works.
Is that the one link shared on the chat? That's the invite for that meeting?
So the link there
That
in the
looks
chat is the entire calendar. When you open the calendar, you can see on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. the environments working group meeting. You can click there to get all the details for how to join that.
Okay, on Wednesday, I see. Okay, that's July 1st, right?
Yes.
Istio advanced meetings. Okay, and that's 10 a.m. Central. Is that
Pacific.
Pacific? Okay, all right.
Okay, so I will put you on the agenda right now for that July 1st meeting just to make sure you've got a spot. If something comes up and you can't make it, I'm sure that will be fine. But that does seem like the right course of action here is take it to the environments working group meeting. They can think about the implications for the product overall and then come up with a proposal to take to the TOC. So
Okay,
cool. Thank you
thank
very much for bringing that. This is that's a great use of the community meeting, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just to clarify one thing further. So today, using the Istio operator, the IOPS CR, we should be able to create like only a single control plane, and but it will allow me to create multiple ingress in different namespaces, right? That should be possible today. Is that correct understanding?
Yes, I believe that is supported. Anyone is welcome to correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks. Is there anyone else who would like to put anything on the agenda? If not, then thanks for your time today, everyone, as always. Let's see, our next meeting is going to be, it looks like July 9th. And it looks like I won't be able to be there, but I'm sure some other people from the project will. So thanks for your time today. Hope you found this interesting, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks, everyone. Thanks. Oh,
Thanks,
and
Dan.
one other thing, if people did not see it, we did add a new member to the Technical Oversight Committee, Neeraj Potter from Aspen Mesh, who's been very active in the project for a couple of years now, was running a working group, is now on the TOC, which is really exciting. So he's not here today, but congratulations to everybody who knows Neeraj. All right, thanks everyone. See you in a couple of weeks.